All right, it's hard to believe, guys, but we are now at the very end of Unit 1 of the Age of Revolution. So let's take a quick stock of where we've been so far in this unit. We began with the topic of absolutism, with kings and queens having total power over their people, believing their power came from God. That was the concept known as divine right. Then we looked at some examples of ideas from the Enlightenment. We saw people like John Locke with the idea of natural rights, and Rousseau with the idea of social contract, and Montesquieu believing in separation of powers, and Voltaire preaching about freedom of speech and freedom of religion and all these things. And then those ideas eventually taking place as forms of revolution. We saw this in the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then we looked at the rise and fall of Napoleon. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to finish up this unit by talking about how these revolutions also affected Latin America and helped kind of create Latin America as we know it today. So let's look at the effects of revolutions in Latin America. First, what is Latin America? That's a term you've heard, but you may have never really even stopped to think about what that means. In the modern sense, what Latin America really refers to is basically everything from Mexico southward. Now, there are a couple little exceptions that you might not call Latin America, but in general, that's what it is. And the reason it's called Latin America is most of these territories through here speak a language that that evolved out of Latin, which was the language of the Romans. And so that might be Spanish or Portuguese or French. But again, those languages are spoken here. That's why we call it Latin America. And if you look at the situation in 1790, as the revolution was unfolding in France and had just finished up in America, you can see most of Latin America was still controlled by European powers. The Spanish had the biggest piece of territory. The Portuguese also had a big chunk in the form of Brazil. So let's get into it. And I want you to think about, why would there be revolutions breaking out in Latin America at this time in the first place? What would have happened to cause them? And the Enlightenment definitely helped, right? So all those ideas we were just talking about, they're coming from Europe. They're also coming from America, and not only are they seeing ideas, they're actually seeing these ideas put into action in the form of the American and French revolutions, both of which were successful in overthrowing the established government. And so people of Latin America are thinking, hey, why are we listening to the Spanish, the Portuguese? Why are we being ruled by people from hundreds of miles away? We can rule ourselves. We're going to begin with Haiti. So the country we know as Haiti today lies on an island known as Hispaniola. It's the western half of this island. The eastern half is a country known as the Dominican Republic. And this Haiti that we call it was actually called Saint-Domingue by the British, by the French. It was a French colony they controlled for centuries. And the revolution that's going to take place there is a result of a slave system. So Saint-Domingue, or Haiti, was critical to the French colonial empire. It was a big moneymaker for France because on Haiti was grown sugarcane, and sugarcane, of course, was in high demand, and it was also very, very profitable. And there was such demand for that profit and for the crop itself that France had imported over many years thousands and thousands and thousands of African slaves to work the sugarcane fields and to produce the sugar. This was back-breaking, brutal labor. The life of a slave was miserable, and many of them would end up dying from disease, malnutrition, overwork, accidents, that sort of thing. And by the time we get to Haiti's revolution, you have a very unstable situation in which slaves actually outnumbered the white French 10-1 in the country. So for every one French person, there was basically 10 slaves, and that kind of tells you this is not a system that can be sustained long term. So in August of 1791, while France is undergoing its revolution, about 100,000 enslaved Africans rose up in revolt, and it's going to be a long, drawn out guerrilla war between different factions. It actually gets pretty complicated, the story of Haiti's revolution. But just to keep it simple, the leader of the revolt, one of the major leaders anyways, was a man named Toussaint Louverture. And Toussaint Louverture had been a slave had gotten his freedom, and he sees himself as the man who's going to lead Haiti to independence. Couple images here of the brutal fighting going on between the French soldiers and the Haitian rebellion. And notice the Haitian rebels, they're in a variety of different uniforms. Some of them are actually wearing captured French uniforms. Some of them wearing kind of a mix of different uniforms, and then some of them just wearing whatever clothes they have here. So it's kind of a ragtag army going up against an equipped army, but they are smaller in number, and they don't know the land as well. They're dying from disease, and so the French are actually at a disadvantage in much of this revolution. Again, just a couple more images here from the revolution. You got your French soldiers over here and the rebels over there. Let me go back to this picture. Haiti does win its independence from France. Toussaint Louverture, the leader of that revolution, was basically captured by the French, sent to France, and died in a prison there. But Haiti's example was very inspirational to enslaved people across the Western Hemisphere. They heard about this group of slaves who had risen up and gained their freedom by force, and it certainly inspired them. And even though Haiti today is a very, very poor country, it's got many, many problems, it is a country that's proud of its independence and how they achieved it. All right, let's go a little further south, get on to the mainland of South America, and talk about a man named Simón Bolívar. So again, as a quick review, most of South America was owned either by the Spanish or the Portuguese, and we're going to focus on the Spanish part first, and we're going to go to a place called New Granada, to modern-day Venezuela, which would be right about there. And in that territory we call Venezuela today was born a man named Simón Bolívar. And Simón Bolívar was not a poor peasant. He grew up in a well-to-do family. He had a lot of access to education and opportunities that most people did not have in South America. He had traveled to Europe, and he'd seen the effect of Napoleon's reforms and his conquests and such, and he was inspired. He was also inspired by the Enlightenment. And what he wanted to do was free his people. He wanted to free South America from Spanish control. And to free something is to liberate it. That's why Bolívar is known as the Liberator. There's also a modern-day country in South America named for him. It's called Bolivia. So, what he does is he leads a series of revolts across northern South America. You can see the arrows kind of as his armies are sweeping across northern South America. He's able to take advantage of the fact that Spain is distracted by a lot of conflicts overseas, back at home, in other words, with Napoleon and such. And he's able to gain quite a lot of land. He marches his army across the Andes, for example, and scores victory after victory. Now, he can't do this alone, of course. And Bolívar is going to team up with another well-to-do Spanish colonist who wanted to free his people. His name was José de San Martín. And de San Martín had actually has had quite a lot of battle experience already. And so he's going to help lead the revolutions in southern South America. And between the two men, they're able to free, basically, the continent from Spanish control. So as South Americans begin to get their independence through force and the Spanish pull out of the territory, think, what country do you think South Americans would imitate as they began to set up their country? What traditions would they draw on and try to replicate? And obviously the most obvious choice is the United States of America. And Bolívar himself had kind of a vision of creating this almost like a United States of South America, where basically all these different provinces of what had been the Spanish Empire would come together and form their own country. They would form an independent and unified country that would basically dominate the continent. That never came to be, however. Different regional rivalries rose to the front, and that dream was never fulfilled. All right, so let's quickly review about South America. There was one major country down there that was not controlled, has not been controlled by Spain. And that country, of course, is Brazil. So what's going on with Brazil down here? Well, they were a Portuguese colony. And the Portuguese had gotten involved in Brazil very early on in the days of exploration. They had basically divided up territory down here with Spain through something called the Treaty of Tordesillas, which goes way back to the 1400s. And they're going to gain independence not through fighting battles or waging a guerrilla war or something like that. In fact, their independence movement is going to be largely bloodless. So let's talk about how this happens. And like almost everything else we've been talking about recently, it always goes back to Napoleon. So Napoleon had invaded Portugal in 1807 after they'd refused to cooperate with Napoleon's continental system. And as Napoleon invaded, the Portuguese royal family fled. They didn't stay behind to be captured or turned into prisoners or something. They fled across the Atlantic Ocean to their giant colony known as Brazil, and there they stayed. Okay, so this is the Portuguese king John VI, and Napoleon, if you recall, was defeated for the final time in 1815. But the royal family actually stayed a couple of more years in Brazil. And when the Portuguese royal family returned to Brazil, the King John's son, Pedro, decided to stay behind. And he stayed behind because he had been offered up the crown of an independent Brazil. So Brazil became an independent monarchy from the Portuguese in 1822, and it would remain a monarchy until 1889. All right, so let's do a quick review here. We learned at the beginning of our discussion that most of Latin America was controlled either by the Spanish or the Portuguese. We also looked at Saint-Domingue, which was a French colony where there was a slave rebellion, and we call that place Haiti today. And then we looked at Simón Bolívar and his revolutions in northern South America, helped by José de San Martín coming up from the south. And then we looked at how Brazil gained its independence peacefully after the royal family went back to Portugal and they became an independent monarchy. That is it for period 1, guys. We looked at all kinds of topics in this unit, the age of revolution. We looked at the causes and effects of these revolutions. In our next unit, we will be covering another revolution, but it's not a political revolution. It's called the Industrial Revolution. And so we're going to talk a lot about inventors, inventions, technologies, and how they changed the world.